I was having the experience of remembering it and knowing it was my true home, like my truest home, and feeling immense awe and bliss and love and relief. And then all at once, all of this information became available to me. And I had the sensation that I already knew these answers. I already knew the information, but I had completely forgotten the information while I was on Earth. And it was wild. So it was like, oh my God, I instantly knew I never could die and that I was eternal. But I also saw even more powerful than that for me, because that was sort of a given for some reason in that state. Oh yeah, we never die. Of course, I forgot. But the other part was I saw how innocent I really was. And that was stunningly profound. I was totally blameless. I was pure and I was innocent and I was deeply cherished and loved. And there was no other being in my NDE. It was just me, but I didn't feel at all alone. And it was the least alone I've ever been in my life. It was like the place itself was alive and it was telling me things and it was loving me. It was just absolutely pretty hard to describe it. So I saw my innocence, and that was mind-blowing, because for years I had carried around immense shame, and for all kinds of things, just shame, for a lot of different reasons. And I think most people carry around a lot of shame, and that was cured in one fell swoop. The shame was gone. I knew I was innocent. The other thing I knew was that that life was completely safe. My life on Earth and here and in this other realm was always safe. There was nothing to be afraid of ever. I also saw that it was all perfect. It was all for love, and it was all perfect, even when I couldn't see it. In the state I was in my NDE, I could see why. I could see it all come together, like seeing the big picture of things, like, oh my God, it's all and it inspired within me feelings of absolutely indescribable gratitude for my life. Life was beautiful from that perspective. It was so meaningful and so rich with experience and love and connection and beauty and all of that and more. And I saw that the place that I was in, this forest with the river and where I was and all this knowledge, was always with me. I was never actually away from it. I just sort of thought I was all that time on Earth. It's another part of it that's very hard to describe. It's like it's closer than your breath, that spiritual realm that we are a part of, and from where we come from, this spiritual realm where we are truly at home, is always, we're carrying it with us all the time. It's closer than my hand. It's closer than the teeth in my head. It's right there, but you can't see it. And the only reason you can't see it, and this is really, really amazing and very simple, the only reason we can't see it is because of fear. And that's a very deep topic. And I've spent hours and hours and hours and days and months and years now trying to dissect how fear infects our lives and how it gets into everything and how it completely warps our perspective on life and on ourselves and on everything. For example, everyone is absolutely astonishingly beautiful. Everyone is incomparably beautiful. And I mean that literally. But because of fear and shame, we can't see it. We can't see it all the time. We rarely can see it to the degree that it is a reality. If we could see it, put it this way, if you could see how beautiful you really are, you would never, ever worry about your looks again. You would just be out in the world just as an innocent child that loves themselves. You wouldn't, like, yeah, I'm beautiful, and so are you. I mean, it really is like that. I know it sounds corny, but it really was. That was what I saw.
At that point, I absolutely did not want to come back here into the physical body, because it was just so amazing in the other realm. I had never recalled ever feeling so light before and so liberated. The fear was gone, the fear of the cancer, the pain. I had suffered for 4 years in discomfort. It was all gone. There was no reason to go back to that physical body. Not only had I been suffering, but my family had been suffering, caring for me. And I just couldn't see a single reason to go back. But it was in that moment that it seemed my father impressed upon me that it's not your time. You need to go back. There are still some gifts for you. And I felt as though I didn't quite understand at first, because what I felt was, what is the point of going back to a sick body? But also it seemed that in the same instant, it was as though I had this vision of clarity, or like I had entered another dimension. And this other dimension or realm was like I had this feeling of incredible clarity, where suddenly everything made sense. And I understood. I understood why I had the cancer. I understood how everything in my life had led me to that point in time where I was lying there dying on that hospital bed. I understood also that we are amazing, magnificent, powerful beings, because I felt my energy, my essence was so huge and powerful and amazing, powerful beyond my imagination, beyond anything I could ever have known before. And I realized that I had never known this. It was the first time that I knew this. And then I realized that now that I knew what I knew, if I go back into my body, my cancer was going to heal. And it was at that moment that my father impressed upon me, now that you know the truth, go back and live your life fearlessly. And it was at that time that I started to open my eyes and come out of the coma. And as I opened my eyes, I saw my family, I saw my husband, my mother, my brother who had just arrived. And they were all there. And they were smiling because I started to open my eyes. And at first, even though I was opening my eyes and I started talking a little bit, I could hardly talk, and I was very, very groggy. And it seems that I wasn't making any sense. I started to say things like, Dad said I was going to be okay. Dad was there. And they had no idea what I was talking about. But they were just happy that I looked like I was coming out of the coma. And then a little while later, the doctor walked into the room, and he was surprised that I was coming out of the coma. And he actually said, this is wonderful that she's coming out of the coma. And I greeted him by his name. I said, good afternoon, Dr. Chan. And I was very groggy. I said it groggily. And apparently, I had never seen this doctor before until after I'd gone into the coma. That was the first time he treated me. So he looked at me and he said, "How do you know my name?" And I said, "Aren't you the one that took the fluid out of my lungs in the middle of the night?" And he said, "Yeah, but you were in a coma. How would you know that?" And I was still very groggy. I said I was. And when he left the room, I said to my husband, "Why was he so surprised that I recognized him? Isn't he the one that said to you that my organs are shutting down and I won't make it through the night?" And my husband said, "Yeah, but he didn't say that in this room." Apparently, the conversation had taken place 40 feet down the hallway and the door had been shut. And I had been aware of everything that was happening. Over the days, I started to tell them more and more. And I started to remember more and more, because the first couple of days I was really confused. But more interestingly, I said to the doctors, "You can remove the oxygen tube. I don't need it anymore." And sure enough, I didn't need the oxygen. I told them they could remove the food tube. And the doctors were getting really, really surprised. Now, within 4 days, my tumors shrunk by about 70% just to the touch. And even though my body was still very weak, I wanted to sit up. I wanted to talk. It was like I was euphoric. I knew something had happened, but I still didn't understand exactly what had happened. And because I was feeling so euphoric, it was like I still couldn't walk yet, but I just felt so happy. And normally I love listening to music. I absolutely love music, all kinds of music. So I was telling my husband that I want to listen to my music. Can you bring my iPod? And so he brought my iPod into the hospital. And bear in mind, I was in the intensive care unit, separated only by curtains between the other patients. And my husband brought my iPod in. And because I still had the wires connected to me and to my heart and things in my veins, and because I had all these big Band-Aids because of the open skin lesions, I couldn't put the earphones in. So he set up these little speakers by my bedside. And I wanted to listen to Dancing Queen by ABBA over. It's such a happy song. And so I was in my bed just shaking and listening to Dancing Queen over and over. And I was laughing. And then and my husband said, you know, and I hadn't eaten in months, and that's why my muscles had wasted away. And the doctors said, "You've got to eat." And I said, "Yes, I'm ready to eat." And they said, "What's the first thing you want?" I said, "Chocolate ice cream." And they, surprisingly, they actually said, "That's all right, you can have that because it's soothing for the throat." They just removed the food tube. And so there I was with the chocolate ice cream and listening to Dancing Queen. And finally, one of the nurses came in and she said, "The families of the other patients are complaining." They said, "You're causing a disruption in the intensive care unit." So they had to move me to a regular room. And the doctor said that these open skin lesions I had, the doctor said they would have to call in a reconstructive surgeon to actually stitch them up, because they were so big, the wounds were so big, they were not going to heal on their own, particularly because I was still very malnourished. They said I didn't have the strength to heal. What subsequently happened was that the reconstructive surgeon came in and said that definitely he would need to do surgery, but I was too weak, so he would come back in 3 weeks. When he came back 3 weeks later, he said the wounds have started to heal all by themselves. I won't need surgery. Not only that, but about 9 days after my NDE, the doctors were actually waiting for me to get stronger so that they could continue to give me treatments and do tests, run tests like biopsies. So about 9 days after my NDE, they wanted to do a bone marrow biopsy. I kept telling them that you won't find any cancer. I know I'm healed. I know why I'm back now. And they said, that's fine. It's fine you think that way, but we need to do what we need to do. And they said, cancer doesn't just disappear like that. We just have to find it. And they did the bone marrow biopsy, and there was no trace of cancer. And they still said that, nope, the cancer doesn't disappear. Now we'll have to do a lymph node biopsy. And when they sent me to the radiologist office for him to mark a lymph node using the ultrasound, he was really surprised, because he said he couldn't even find a lymph node big enough to suggest cancer, when the scans on his light box showed that just 3 weeks previously, my entire neck was covered with tumors and enlarged lymph nodes. The oncologist, however, insisted that I still have a biopsy on any lymph node. And they confirmed that there was no trace of cancer. Finally, they did a full body PET scan. And although I was receiving treatments, they confirmed that they could cut the treatments short. And they sent me home from the hospital because it was confirmed there was no trace of cancer in my body. And finally, they sent me home after 5 weeks in the hospital, because by that point, I was strong enough to walk around and take care of myself and to go out. On the day they were releasing me to go home, I was actually ecstatic. I was thinking, I've been sick for so long. The first thing I wanted to do was to go shopping. And when the doctors were releasing me, the doctor actually said to me, oh, you must be so happy to go home. I said, yes, absolutely. And he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to go shopping. And he said, no, you're absolutely not going to go shopping. You're still weak, and there are people in the shops. You're going to go home and rest. And he actually wrote on my discharge slip, released to go home for further rest, no shopping. The interesting thing was that this was actually later picked up by another oncologist who studied my case much later, when an oncologist flew to Hong Kong to study my medical records. He actually contacted me and he said, in your medical records, your oncologist has said no shopping. And I said, yeah, that's right. So the reason I'm here today, as I mentioned to you, is because the biggest thing I learned is that life is really a gift. And there's a reason why I'm here, and there's a reason why every single one of you are here. And I want to convey to you the value of your life and how important it is for you to be here right now.
Now, I was alone there for an eternity. And what I mean by that was absolutely no sense of time. But I thought about my life, thought about what I'd done and what I hadn't done. I thought about the situation I was in. And the conclusion that I came to is that I had lived my adult life. I had lived a selfish life. My only God in my adult life was myself. I realized that I was something terribly, terribly wrong with my life, and that the people that attacked me were the same kind of people that I was. They were not monsters, they weren't demons. They were people who had missed it. The point of being born and being alive in this world. They'd missed it, and they'd lived lives of selfishness and cruelty. And now we're in a world where there was nothing else. There was nothing but selfishness and cruelty, and they were doomed to inflict that upon each other and upon themselves, probably forever and ever and ever and ever, without end. And now I was a part of it. And it seemed like, although I didn't want to be there, it seemed like probably the right place for me to be. There was a sense of like, this is what I deserve, because this is what I lived. You can't imagine how emotionally painful that was. And I'm lying there for time without end, thinking about my fate. And in the back of my mind comes up an image of myself as a child, sitting in a Sunday school classroom, singing Jesus Loves Me. I could hear in my mind, Jesus loves me, la la la, Jesus loves me, la la. And as I recalled myself singing it and heard I could hear myself as a child singing it. More important than anything else was that I could feel it in my heart that there was a time in my life when I was young and innocent, when I believed in something good, when I believed in something other than myself, when I believed in someone who was all good, all powerful, who really, really cared about me. And I knew that I wanted that back, that which I had lost, that I'd thrown away, that I'd betrayed. I wanted that back. That I didn't know Jesus, but I wanted to know Jesus. I didn't know his love, but I wanted to know his love. I didn't know if he was real, but I wanted him to be real. You know, I mean, it was all just because I trusted that there was a time in my life that I had believed in something, and that I knew I had known once as a child that it was true, and I wanted to trust that it was true. So I called out into the darkness, Jesus, please save me.
Please save me.
And he came. He came. First there was a tiny little speck of light in the darkness, and it very rapidly got bright. And the light became so bright that if it were in this world, it would have consumed me. I just would have fried me to a crisp. But it wasn't at all hot or dangerous there. The light just came upon me, and he reached down. He was in this light, and he reached down out of this light and gently started to pick me up. And in his light, I could see that I was gore and filth and wounds all over. And I looked like roadkill. And he's gently putting his hands underneath me and very tenderly picking me up. And as he's touching me, everything just goes away. All the wounds, all the pain, all the dirt, it just kind of like evaporated away. And I'm like whole and healed. And inside, just filled with his love, which I wish I could be more articulate about. It's so frustrating not being able to tell people about it, because, you know, it's the best thing that ever happened to me in my life. I mean, it's like it's the everything. You know, it's the all of life is to know that love. And, you know, I get to it and I just can't describe it. I can't convey it to you. So he's holding me and embracing me, rubbing my back like a father would his son, like a mother would her daughter, just gently rubbing my back. And I'm bawling like a baby, out of happiness. I mean, like the release, you know, having been lost and now been found, having been dead and now brought back to life, you know. And he's carrying me out of there. Up, we just go. Out, gone. And we're moving towards a world of light, and I began to have thoughts of tremendous shame that I've been so bad. I thought of myself as dirt, garbage, filth. And I thought to myself, he's made a mistake. I don't belong here. He doesn't want me. You know, it's like the shame of, like, how could he care about me? You know, why me? I'm bad. And We stopped. We weren't in hell, we weren't in heaven. We were in between. And we stopped, and he said, we don't make mistakes. You belong here.
And I immediately felt myself go into the tunnel. And it was very black, very dark in the tunnel. I wasn't scared at all. I was moving very fast. It was exciting and it felt exhilarating. The tunnel ride was very quick, and I popped right out of the tunnel, and I was immediately in the white light. The light was so bright and beautiful and powerful that it took me a minute to adjust and understand what was going on there too. As soon as I started to settle into it, I understood that it was heaven. I started to feel the light more and feel the energy of what that was. And I immediately felt this overwhelming sense of unconditional love. Love like I have never felt before. No matter what I had been through in my life, no matter what I had done, it was just complete love for me. I was bathing in it. It was wrapped around me, and it made me feel valued, appreciated, and accepted. The next thing I felt was an overwhelming sense of peace, that everything was okay and that everything was right, that all was well. I was getting a healing. I started to notice all the areas in my soul or in my energetic space where there were wounds or there were holes, and all of those areas were starting to get filled in, and they were getting filled in with love. I was being replenished, and it was the best feeling. It just made me feel like this is who I am. This is who I'm supposed to be. This is what my soul is all about.
And the voice is saying inside me without sound, no gender, no language, I love you. It was showing me love. It was bringing me into love. It was expressing to me eternal love it's unimaginable, incomprehensible. I love you. I've always known you. I've always known these things about you. I've known you since you were created. I've known the long tail of your soul. I know what you were like to be a human being in this life. I love you as you are. I made you. I've always known you. I've always loved you. And I was going through this suffering of all the suffering I gave away, but I was also being, and I call it my own hell. I created my own hell, like Jacob Marley and the Christmas, link by link. I also judged myself as shameful, not because of what I had done, because it was also shown simultaneously that it wasn't my fault that I caused pain. That's a natural outgrowth of being a human being in this world. It's just the way it is. And every human being causes pain to other human beings and to themselves. And that's just the way it is. And that's a known thing by the divine. God knows this about us. And so I carried home to heaven with me all the love that had been given to me and all the love that had been given away, that I gave away is like a treasure. And somehow it helped me turn my inner eye to the holy divine, and was, I don't know, burned clean by the divine fire of purgative love. When I had no more things I did not need, it wasn't like they were bad. It was like, you don't need them, and here's how to get rid of them. And once they were gone, I was filled with this combination of truth, joy, knowledge, bliss, understanding, compassion, hope, adoration, awe, paradise. The list is long, but they weren't all separate things. They're all one thing. And the one word that I would use to encapsulate it all, two words: beauty and love.
The woman who ended up operating on me had been on duty for 40 hours, and so when she took my case. She was very tired herself, but she decided to operate anyway, and it was going to be a long surgery. They were going to have to pick a lot of bone fragments from my spine. So I was wheeled in for surgery, and then I don't know how long into the surgery, but probably long enough for them to open up my back and my hip. My spirit form left my body, and I remember getting just so excited. I saw the body on the operating table. I thought, we go on. Like, this spirit form, this part of me continues on after death, and I knew this immediately. It was almost like I was up in the corner of the room, and I had this knowing of my spirit form as this mirror image of my body, but it was light. It was composed of light. And I was looking down at the surgeons working, and I remember thinking, there's so much blood. Why is there so much blood? And the blood seemed to be spilling onto the sheet, and it looked really gruesome. I later found out that the cause of death was, I bled to death, and that was basically, there were internal injuries that were spilling over. And so I looked at that, but then I looked up, and there were these light beings. Now, I call them angels. They were just these intelligent beings, and they were unlike anything I'd ever imagined or thought. I didn't think of angels like this. Normally we think of angels with wings, but these were just, they looked like they had shimmery robes, and they weren't male or female. They sent telepathic messages to me. They said, you'll be fine. You'll walk, you'll run. Don't worry about this. We've got this. And then they almost playfully said, watch this. And they sent this blast of energy through the back of the surgeons into their hands, and it lit up my whole body. So I knew that they were participating in this healing. The neurosurgeons were great and talented, but I remember thinking, they're so smart, and I bet they have no idea that light beings are working through them. The experience felt real. It didn't feel like a dream. This felt like an added reality to this reality. So the way we're looking at everything, and it looks 3D, it felt like I had opened up 4D, 5D, 6D, whatever. It just felt as if I had opened to see what happens beyond the veil. These angels were participating with my surgeons, but they were just there in another realm that the human eye can't pick up on, but the spirit can.
In those 29 months, I had been praying every night of my life, God, either heal me or let me die. But I was miserable beyond what I could easily say. And I struggled a lot with the idea of taking my own life because I couldn't see a way out. My other prayer was, spare me a life review. I have been through this hellish nightmare once. I beg of you, God, if you have any mercy, do not ask me to ever see this again. And then my third prayer was, I had had to make a lot of very difficult decisions after my husband's death, and I was tired of decisions. I was tired of going to the mailbox. I was tired of everything. So I asked God, please, no more hard decisions. I can't face any more decisions because were there a lot of decisions to make. So after this cervical biopsy resulted in such a catastrophic blood loss, I was in that white tiled shower and standing there, and I'm watching the blood pour out of my body and just go down the center drain of the shower. And I remember thinking very clearly, this is what I've been praying for. I asked God to heal me or let me go. I'm out. And I was relieved. And I thought to myself, you can just sit down on this shower floor now, and it won't be long. You'll be gone soon. And I thought about the two people keeping me alive and keeping me fed and helping me become part of society again. They had showered me with so much love and care. And I thought, I can't do that to them. That they come into this bedroom and into my bathroom to see how I'm doing and find me splayed on the floor, bled to death. So I made a conscious choice. It was frankly a hard decision to not sit down on that shower floor, but physically push off that wall, get the energy to step out of that shower, walk into the living room and say to my friends, call 911. I was very frightened, and I knew I had lost a catastrophic amount of blood. But I grabbed that nurse's hand and I said, "Promise me you're not going to let me die." And she was very soothing and very motherly and very tender. And she said, "Oh, honey, we have so many solutions for this. I promise we're not going to let you die." So they gave me a shot for pain. They gave me some Dilaudid, and I don't think it was 60 seconds that I lost consciousness. My friend Milton, who was the person who'd been taking care of me for 29 months, he stayed in the room and the nurse and the doctor left. Well, they left me hooked up to a pulse ox machine that measures the oxygen, I guess, in your body. It's a little thing they put on your finger, and they left me hooked up to a blood pressure machine. So Milton was watching that blood pressure machine, and suddenly it started going down, 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 and he looked over at it, and my blood pressure was 32/25 at one point. And he said, "Your eyes had been closed, but then when it hit that number, your eyes popped open. You tried to sit up on the gurney. You reached up to heaven, talked to somebody only you could see." And he said, "And then you plopped back down. And then the blood pressure went to error." And I'm pretty sure that's when I left. That's when I went to heaven. It was the most perfect peace any human could even imagine, multiplied by 1,000,000,000, and that's not enough. As a writer, I've always been anxious, nervous, neurotic, concerned, overthinking everything, and I have not known a lot of peace. And in this experience, I realized I always wondered what I would look like if you took away all those fears and worries and woes and anxieties, and I thought, this is it. This is wonderful. I was in a beautiful white, bright white room, and I was now walking or perambulating. And I remember that word perambulating came to thought because I didn't pay attention to see if I had a body, but I knew I was on 2 legs, and I knew I had a head, and I knew I had a pair of arms. And in this white room, I was surrounded by this beautiful white, tiny, tiny droplets. It was like a fog, but it wasn't a fog. It wasn't warm, it wasn't cold, it wasn't damp, it wasn't dry. It was perfect. And this white room didn't have lights. The lights came from within the walls and the floor and the ceiling, but it was the most intense, perfect white light. It was luminescent, iridescent, white, white, white. And I was on my feet, and as I walked, this white mist swirled all around me. And I tried to focus on an individual droplet. And I know that sounds hard to imagine, but I felt like I should be able to see, even though this was as tiny as vapor in a fog, I thought I should be able to see those droplets. And the spiritual being that was with me said, "Your eyes haven't acclimated to this place yet, and you can't focus on it, but what you're seeing are tiny droplets of light, and they're surrounding you and blessing you and healing you." And they said, regardless of whether you go to heaven or whether you return to earth, you're here for healing, because you have been in so much pain, and this is how we heal. And if you decided to go on to heaven, you would still need to be healed. Everyone who goes into heaven, they can't go with a disease process imprinted on their consciousness or thinking that some mental illness is part of their identity. So we all pass through the white room for healing, as my friend said, and I thought it was a beautiful analogy. She said, "Leave your muddy boots at the door." And I thought that was very well put. So in this white room, at the far end of it, I saw a door. I knew what that door was. I knew that that was the point of no return, and I had not a thought of returning.
And the coin of that realm is love, that unconditional love that goes far beyond the phrase, far beyond those words. And of course, so many who have had near-death experiences and shared death experiences and other similarly spiritually transformative experiences know exactly what that's all about, that unconditional love. And the reason it's so important for all of us to get is because we're here in Soul School to learn those lessons of that love. And what we find is that that unconditional love has infinite power to heal. And I came from my journey to see that the hardships and difficulties in this life, and I promise you as a neurosurgeon, as a doctor, that very much includes illness and injury. They are gifts. They are opportunity for growth of our souls. We are all here as members of soul groups to do this growing. And when I talk about soul mates, I'm not just talking about that love of your life. I also came to see that often those who I had seen before my coma as my nemesis, as someone who was in my way, preventing me from getting something I wanted in this life, often is a very near and dear soul mate. And I came to see the power of that love, that unconditional love, to heal. It heals the individual, it heals the soul group, it heals all of humanity, it heals life all around this world, and it heals consciousness throughout this universe.
I was advancing toward the door, and as I did, this fog was dancing around me. I can't describe it better than that. It was swirling around me. It's like every tiny droplet had life, had the whole of life, and it was all moving all around me, and it was an incredible experience. And what's interesting, in all my reading about NDEs, I'd never read about a white room. I had had a different NDE from what I'd read about my whole life, and I thought this is pretty interesting. But I made it to the door, and I was thrilled. I was going to go through that door, and I didn't have any thought of going back. Some people have said to me, didn't you want to go back to Earth? And I said, no, not at all. Nothing in me wanted to go back to Earth. And as I got close to that door, I paused and I said, is this the divine will for my life? That a simple medical procedure kills me? Is this what God wants? That was my thought. And I got to, is this the divine? And the answer came immediately. I never even got out the rest of the words. The answer was, no, it's not. But whatever you decide, whether you decide to go on or return to Earth, whatever you decide, you go with all of God's blessings and mercy and grace and love and care. There are no wrong decisions. And that meant so much to me, because that was my third prayer, that I could no longer tolerate these difficult decisions I'd been forced to make after my husband's suicide. And to know that my prayers of petition were heard on such an intimate level, that God was saying there is not a wrong decision here. And it wasn't even saying a bad decision, but a wrong decision. So I thought, I'll take that deal. And I was very grateful that I knew that I was going home, that I had done my time. I honestly felt more like somebody who'd been granted early release for good behavior. And I mean that sincerely. It has not been an easy life. So I raised my right hand up to push through this door. I really thought that door should be open. I was a little annoyed that it was shut. And I was pretty interested by the fact that as I did this, I was raising my right hand. Right-handed on earth, right-handed in heaven, apparently. And as I did that, I had a vision of that nurse who had held my hand and promised me she wasn't going to let me die. I had a vision of her sitting alone in a hospital supply room on a metal stool, leaning forward with her head in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. And in this vision, this was a very intense vision, I heard her say through the sobs, I promised that woman I wasn't going to let her die, and I lost her. And I looked at that and I thought, oh man, that's bad. And then I did think, I'm sorry, but I need to go. I am done. I need to leave this place because I know what I'm going back to. And then I didn't just see the nurse, I felt her pain. I was the nurse for a moment. And that pain, the only way to describe it is it's like the pain hit me squarely in the chest of what she was feeling, that agonal grief, which I knew all too well, having suffered through that after my husband's death. And that's when I realized, if I could spare that nurse that level of suffering and regret and guilt and self-recrimination and every other negative emotion, I could not do this to her. And it was it was a little bit vexing because I wanted to go. But I put my right hand back down to my side and, slightly disappointed, I said, this is going to ruin that nurse's day if I die. But in that ER, they slung me on a gurney awfully quick, very, very quick. I suspect now they thought I would die again. And then I was transported to a fairly large hospital. I had been told at that door, and I was told also upon my return, that in agreeing to come back from heaven, in agreeing to come back to earth, that I would be healed. And the healing was my soul. You know, we can heal a lot of things with the body, but I believe it's only God that can heal our soul. And that's what was healed in heaven. And ultimately, I went through many, many medical tests. And you know, they thought that there would be a lot of consequences from a 59-year-old woman bleeding to death. I found out the next morning at the hospital. It was very affirming. I'd actually bled out to a point that my heart went into VFib, and then I had a heart attack. He said, we're going to do a lot of tests. And I told him then, I said, oh, no, you don't need to do any tests. The angels told me if I came back, I'd be fine. And they don't quite accept that with the same authority that I was accepting it. And they did heart tests and, an echocardiogram and a couple other things. And again and again and again, what I heard was, you're a very lucky woman. Everything's fine. And I said, oh, I know. I knew it would be. But and ultimately, it was confirmed that every vestige of the cancer was gone. Not a trace. Not any of it was left. And while people love that part of the story, and it's very important, I didn't have to endure the chemo and the radiation, it was all gone. The real healing was the healing of my soul. My peace had returned, and I had been, it was like a father who hears his child screaming in the bedroom and rushes in to awaken her from a nightmare. It wasn't that I was better. It's that I saw that I had been caught in this horrible nightmare, and all the pain and the guilt from my husband's death and all the et ceteras involved, and I've been shaken awake. And I realized, wow, this isn't my story, that I've been through this horrible thing. And in hours, I realized, and I'm still in a hospital bed. I was in a hospital bed on total bed rest for 4 days after this. I realized within hours, not only is it not your story, it's not even his story. He's also a child of God. And that was, so liberating. It was transformative. It changed everything. While I was very tempted by suicide before this happened, I recognized so clearly that we are here on a spiritual contract. And I guess that's one of the big changes in me, is I haven't had a single thought of suicide. I still get sad, I still cry, I miss my husband, I think about him a lot. But I recognize that to end your own life violates a spiritual contract, and it's just the whole temptation is gone. I mean, it's not even on the radar.
The one episode that perplexes me and changed my perspective on everything was they put in an implanted cardiac defibrillator. And in order to test it, they had to kill me, but just for a little while they would stop my heart with chemicals. And the test was only going to last 20 seconds. And 20 seconds later, I was here again. But it wasn't 20 seconds for me. Wherever I had been was an undefinable, eternal time where I was totally settled in. I was totally happy wherever I was when I was dead here. And there's only two things that I remembered when I came back to life, as if I was in a conversation. I had agreed to come back, and I was being told the way to get through all the rest of my life was to be positive. Health was obviously an enormous concern for me. The scientifical, modern medical community had done all they could with me and had fixed me. And I was on probably a half a dozen different medications. Basically, I just felt like I was on horse tranquilizers all the time. And that didn't feel like living to me. So I was very concerned with how to regain not only being alive on this plane of existence, but how to be healthy. And I think a lot of it just comes down to, as simplistic as it seems, is diet and exercise and a good attitude. JFK said one of the simplest, most rewarding delights in life is riding a bicycle. And I ride a bicycle every place around the crowded streets where I live because I get that feeling of, wow, this is a simple pleasure surrounded by chaos. There is so much negativity in the universe. I wouldn't even say in the universe. There's so much negativity in the human perspective right now, in politics, in the entertainment industry, all of the god-awful worst stuff you can possibly imagine seems to be happening all at once and is reported constantly. So I would say, if I brought back something to me that not everybody seems to have that I have now, is what Jesus said, is I would not take you out of the world, but I would take you out of the evil in the world. You can vibrate on a positive level, and it works like telepathy. And the more you have an all-encompassing, loving, engaging perspective on life and whatever you encounter in life, the more you vibrate on that level and attract good stuff to you by being positive. And so I think that's why I was given the most simplistic interpretation of life on this plane of existence and other ones beyond is be positive. But my experience of being dead didn't change me that much, but I think it changed my perspective on everything that this planet and this universe is about. I'm convinced this is only a classroom or a trip to Disneyland that we take and learn a lot of lessons in how to assimilate life, appreciate the people in our lives, and appreciate what a wonderful gift life on this planet is, as opposed to in different states of conflict. The one message I got was to be positive.
I was rescued by the light, taken to the light, and like any good atheist that stands before the light, I immediately knew it was God. My first big question to the light that I perceived as God, and I won't even go into how the light feels because you know it and you've talked about it a lot. It's fantastic. My first question to the light was, why is humanity so dark and doomed? Why was this ever created? At that moment, the light breathed me into it. And suddenly I found myself in a mandala. Is the only thing I can tell you it looked like, an endless mandala of living human souls, of all the human souls that had ever existed. And in that mandala of human souls, I could look into every human soul. And you may not believe this, but I had a look in all of your souls too. All of you were there, every human soul that had ever been. And in that, I could see no evil, no darkness whatsoever. And then I was shown my soul. And there was no darkness, nothing that I suspected. It was not there. It was all an illusion. And in that moment, it was like an atom bomb went off. And everything that I ever knew was obliterated. And then these souls, and it was all of you too, gave me life again. These souls gave my soul life again. And in that, my soul was reborn. I had never received such love in my life as I received in the mandala of human souls with the light. I keep that love alive in my heart forever.